Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome here to the launch pad and our live launch coverage of SpaceX Starlink 6-19 launching from Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. If it's your first time here, welcome. My name's Zach. I'm the founder and host here at the launch pad, and here at TLP, it's our mission to inform and inspire the explorers of tomorrow, because we believe that space is better together. See people jumping in the chat already. Mike's watching in Columbus. We got Denise in California, Carolyn in Oregon, Bruce is in Chula Vista, California. We've got David in Michigan, Star Strikers in South Carolina. We got Port Stain in London, Ontario. Great to have you all joining us here for tonight's launch. As always, you can head over to tlpnetwork.com and check out today's mission briefing for more information about today's flight as we continue to work this new world with SpaceX broadcasting their Starlink launches and Falcon 9 launches a bit differently. As we wait for SpaceX to begin a live view from the pad here in the next couple of minutes, some of the highlights and mission stats for today. If today's mission launches, this will be the 10th flight of Booster 1069 after previously supporting a number of Starlink missions as well as some other customer payloads. This will also be the 9th SpaceX Falcon 9 launch of September. We have 10 Falcon 9s pending for launch in October. SpaceX really pushing towards hitting that 100 mark by the end of this year. This will be the 260th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 66th Falcon 9 to launch this year, and it'll be the 202nd Falcon 9 reflight of a booster. As we said, it'll be SpaceX's 69th orbital launch of 2023, this is their 87th in the past 365 days. This is their 146th launch from Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, and the 201st launch from Slick 40 in its history. This will also be the 52nd launch from Cape Canaveral as Cape Canaveral continues to push forward in becoming a much more active spaceport than we've seen in the past. As we are coming down to that 5-minute mark, if you haven't yet, take a moment, engage that like button, share out the stream, invite people to join us. We're just waiting for SpaceX to begin their live pad view, and then we will patch that in for you momentarily to bring you that live coverage for today's launch. As usual, SpaceX will no longer be covering Starlink deployments through launch. Today's Starlinks will deploy 1 hour, 5 minutes into flight, so we will be having that confirmation via social media. If you guys have comments or questions, you can send those in the chat by tagging us at the launch pad. We'll work on answering those live to the best of our abilities. We continue through tonight's stream, waiting for SpaceX to begin their live view from tonight. And it looks like we do have that live view from the pad now. So we're going to take you there. 3, 2, 1. You're looking at a live view of Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. And for those of you that are paying attention, you might see something a little bit different about Slick 40. That is the new tower being constructed by SpaceX to bring Slick 40 online to support Crew and Cargo Dragon missions by next year. To the right of that Falcon 9 is that new tower being constructed. Really exciting to see this kind of next stage of Slick 40's history beginning and seeing that tower come alive, because that will be what helps bring Launch Complex 39A able to support Starship, by them having a secondary pad, meaning that America has secured its access to the International Space Station. If you're just joining us, we are now under 4 minutes and counting until launch of SpaceX Starlink 6-19, the 9th launch of September 23. With today's launch, SpaceX will have launched a total of 5,200 Starlink satellites into orbit, with just under 4,800 still actually in orbit functioning, not including today. There's 22 more Starlink 2 minis on board, as 2s will begin launching once Starship becomes operational. As we are now under 3 minutes 30 seconds into launch, that strong back retrack has begun, and we're seeing some of these new views with this new launch tower being constructed. As you can, gives us a great idea of what this tower will look like. It will have a crew access arm being able to reach over to Dragon, similarly to what we see at Launch Complex 39A. Based on what we're seeing, we think we have about 2 more segments that need to be stacked onto the tower for this base, and then they'll be able to start development and installation of the elevator, the crew access arm, with hopefully testing beginning by the end of the year or very early next year. Now under 3 minutes and counting, as always here at the launch pad, we take a moment and we do that go, no go in the chat. So take a moment, and we want to see go, no go from you in the chat there. If you haven't yet, take a moment, engage that like button, share out the stream, invite people to join us. We'll continue to bring you full live launch coverage here on YouTube, even if we do expand out to covering on other platforms as well. T-minus 2 minutes, 20 seconds and counting till launch. The next major milestones will be Falcon 9 going into startup. That'll be at the 1 minute mark. 45 seconds to launch. That's when the launch director will give a final go, no go for launch here this evening. If you guys have questions, you can send those in the chat by tagging us at the launch pad, and we'll work on answering them live. Airavail, will this be the first time there have been 4 active crew launch pads at the Cape? 2 Dragon, SLS Orion, and Starliner. I believe so. There might have been back in the very early days of testing with like Mercury and Geminis and stuff, but definitely for this number of vehicles and functionality. So absolutely a first for the Space Coast. T-minus 90 seconds and counting. We're listening into the mission control nets as SpaceX continues to count down to launch. Their 9th launch of September 2023, continuing to push forward towards that goal of passing 100 launches this year. T-minus 60 seconds. And there's that call out that Falcon 9 is now in startup. Waiting for the call out that the launch director has given a final go for launch. Keep in mind, Falcon is in control.
LD, go up to launch.
And there we go. Launch director has cleared tonight's launch. The vehicle is in startup. T-minus 35 seconds. The next major milestone is going to be those engine controllers commanding ignition of the 9 Merlin engines. T-minus 25 seconds. T-minus 20 seconds.
15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition, engines full power, and liftoff of Starlink 619. Go Starlink, go Falcon.
Falcon 9 booster 1069 launching for its 10th mission from Slick 40, carrying 22 more Starlink satellites to orbit. Now continuing towards maximum max Q, or maximum aerodynamic pressure or mechanical stress on Falcon 9. We're about 40 seconds, away from that. Coming up to 40 seconds into flight now, 3.5 kilometers in altitude, 800 kilometers an hour traveling.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Falcon 9 is now beginning to turn down range. 50 seconds into flight, now over 1,100 kilometers an hour, 7 kilometers in altitude. Stand by for that call out of max Q.
Max Q.
And there's that call out for maximum dynamic pressure on the vehicle. The first stage will continue now on its journey here, now traveling 2,200 kilometers an hour, already 18 kilometers in altitude, coming up to 90 seconds into flight. We're now 60 seconds away from a sequence of events. First stage cutoff, or MECO, main engine cutoff, as well as first and second stage separation, and then second stage ignition, or MVAC ignition. The sequence will begin 2 minutes 25 seconds into flight. About 30 seconds later, it'll be closely followed by fairing deployment. So we're going to listen for that sequence to begin here about 30 seconds from now. Coming up to 2 minutes into flight, Falcon now traveling 4,700 kilometers an hour, 37 kilometers in altitude, heading downrange. Ten seconds till that sequence of events: MECO, stage separation, and MVAC ignition, followed by fairing separation. Let's listen in.
MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
And back ignition.
And you can see those grid fins deploying, waiting for fairing separation.
Bearing separation confirmed.
And those 22 Starlinks are now exposed to the vacuum of space for the first time. That first stage is now beginning its journey up to its apogee. Keep a close eye on its speed and altitude on the bottom left corner of your screen. That's the first stage's telemetry. The bottom right, that's second stage. It's continuing to fire that MVAC engine for its first burn. That burn will continue for a number of more minutes through the full sequence of re-entry and landing of the first stage. We're about 7 kilometers away in altitude from when we see first stage reach its apogee. Keep a close eye on that speed. It'll begin to go up, and the altitude will hold. And the altitude will hold and then begin to descend. Generally, we see that around 116 and 117. You can see that speed really starting to slow on the first stage. And Falcon 9's first stage, booster 1069, has reached apogee. 4 minutes 30 seconds into flight, now beginning to descend back down towards the drone ship for recovery here this evening. Next milestone for the first stage is going to be that entry burn. That's going to begin 6 minutes 7 seconds into today's flight. That burn will last just over 20 seconds, giving it kind of a force field below the booster as it goes through the Earth's atmosphere, not only slowing it down, but protecting both the booster and the engines for its re-entry. Now coming up to 5 minutes into flight, the second stage now traveling over 11,500 kilometers an hour, 150 kilometers in altitude, well over that Kármán line. The first stage about to pass back through the Kármán line under that point of 100 kilometers. About 40 seconds away from that entry burn. Listening for those callouts. First stage now below the Kármán line, beginning to increase its speed as it begins back down to today's drone ship. "20 seconds from entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS has saved.
Flight termination's been saved on the first stage.
Entry burn startup.
And there's that startup of those 3 Merlin engines preparing the Falcon 9 as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. You can see that speed very quickly decreasing as it slows down, preparing for its recovery. Waiting for call out of a good burn.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And that looked
Stage
like
2 FTS has saved.
Looked like a good, clean burn of the Falcon 9's first stage. You also heard there the call out at the flight termination system on the second stage has been safed. That means it is now in some level of an orbit and would be safe. Coming up to 7 minutes into flight, the first stage now below 30 kilometers, second stage 161 kilometers in altitude, coming up to 17,500 kilometers an hour in speed.
Both vehicles continue to follow nominal trajectories.
We're 60 seconds away from that first stage landing burn. That landing burn set to last about 22 seconds. If you haven't yet, take a moment, engage that subscribe button so you never miss another live launch coverage of SpaceX or anyone else right here on the Launch Pad as part of the Launch Pad network. Here at TLP, it's our mission to inform and inspire the explorers of tomorrow because we believe that space is better together. So consider joining us over on our TLP Discord. It's free to join. It's where our community hangs out. You can also head on over to the TLP shop. Use promo code LaunchDay. Save 10% off of everything there. Now 30 seconds away from that first stage landing burn. This will happen almost in equal time to that second stage engine having cutoff. Falcon 9 will, the Starlinks will not be deployed until 1 hour, 5 minutes into flight. SpaceX will confirm that via social media. Booster 1069 now, less than 10 seconds away from that landing burn start.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance. Stage 1 landing burn.
And we have a good landing burn. You can see those grid fins steering Booster 1069 towards the drone ship. Hopefully we'll get a good clean view. View now from the drone ship.
Stage 1 landing leg deployed.
And we have touched down very close to the camera, and that one looked like it came in a little fast there, but with that, Falcon 9 Booster 1069 has completed its 10th mission, waiting for the call out of SECO 1, or second engine cutoff of the second stage.
SECO 1.
And there we have that call out that we have had a good orbit. SECO 1 with those 22 Starlink satellites are now in orbit, but that is going to do it for us here tonight. SpaceX no longer brings live coverage of their Starlink deployment missions, only their customer missions. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Launchpad as part of the Launchpad Network. If you haven't yet, take a moment, engage that subscribe button so you never miss another live launch coverage right here on TLP, and join us over on the TLP Network Discord. But that's going to do it for us here tonight. We hope to see you next time. But from TLP Canada Studio, my name's Zach. Good night.